Fractal Design has had a somewhat checkered history when scaling their generally excellent full-size ATX enclosures down to mini ITX size. Cases like the Core 500 were generally good but unexciting. The Node 202 was unique at the time but a bit of a hotbox, and the Era ITX was beautiful but had a number of issues ranging from high price to lack of airflow. But this time around, Fractal has decided to keep things simple by taking their 2021 case of the year and shrinking it to both 75% and 50% sizes. As a result, we have two new compelling Torrent cases to choose from. Let's take a closer look at both. Welcome to BPS Customs, guys. If you're new here, my name is Brian, and if you like what this video is about and want to see more on gaming PCs, overclocking, and hardware reviews, make sure to get subscribed before you leave here today. I've always been a fan of Fractal Design. I built my first water-cooled PC in one of their R4 cases. I've done a ton of product reviews of their launches over the years, and I've recommended their Meshify and Define cases many times for varying applications. Last year, when the Torrent was released, it certainly signaled a shift for the company as they took quite the giant leap away from what made them successful for the first part of the company's history. For years, all we really saw from Fractal were variations on the standard black rectangle, with a little tweak to interior layout here or maybe a different front panel there. But the Torrent addressed a whole host of issues in one fell swoop, and as a result was probably their best product ever. But there was still one glaring issue: the size. It's certainly a big girl, and not everyone needs or wants this much room for components or to occupy their entire desk with their PC case. Enter the Torrent Compact and the Torrent Nano. Let's first talk about the Compact, as the ATX form factor is still the dominant force in the market. Coming in at 450 by 222 by 467 millimeters, it shaves about 10 centimeters off of the length and 6 centimeters off of the height of its big brother, while maintaining almost the same depth for tower cooler and large GPU clearance. They've also managed to keep a reasonable amount of fan compatibility and the same twin 180mm front-mounted fans for intake. Those front fans move a lot of air without being overly loud due to their sheer size. But just keep in mind that it's unlikely you'll be able to utilize them for a radiator setup unless you have some pretty specialized equipment. For more on that, check out this video that I did with Gamers Nexus, where we built a full custom loop in the original Torrent and ran into issues. For a more practical application, take these two giant spinny boys and transplant them down to the bottom of the case, where you can mount 180, 140, or 120mm size fans with the included brackets. This will afford you the room to populate the front of the case with up to a 360mm radiator. Just keep in mind that if you do choose to go this route, you'll be cutting some space that can be allocated to GPU clearance. The only other fan mounting option here is in the rear, where you can stick a 120mm exhaust if you so choose. The top of the case cannot be used for fans or radiators for the same reason as we saw in the big Torrent. The power supply has been bumped up top here and covered by a shroud and an RGB feature strip. In my experience, it doesn't make a lot of difference if the PSU is at the top or the bottom, but it's nice to have direct access to your cables once you remove the top panel instead of having to cram your hands into a bottom-mounted shroud. Additionally, this chamber is pretty big and can support power supplies over 200mm in length. Compatibility with larger hardware is actually a strength of this case all around. It can support motherboards up to 274mm in width, or 10.8 inches. While this does technically encroach on eATX territory, you'll need to be careful which eATX boards you try to cram in here, as many of them are around 300mm in width and won't work. I think case manufacturers should stick to actual motherboard width when discussing compatibility, as opposed to using the fairly nebulous eATX/ATX monikers. It just makes things more clear. GPU length is capped to 330mm with the stock fans in place, which is enough to fit 98% of graphics cards on the market, but owners of cards like the 6900 XT from XFX might be disappointed to know that it's a bit too long here. Again, if you choose to go AIO up front, the combined thickness of the radiator and fans will reduce this. CPU tower cooler height is 174mm, which fits even the chonky Noctua and HD 15. Swinging this thing around and checking out its backside, We see less depth than on the big Torrent, of course, as expected, but even though there are Velcro ties and a routing channel here, I did find this space to be unexpectedly cramped. You'll need to put on your big boy cable management pants to make this work, but a big help here is the included fan hub at the front, which Fractal has designed to both control all of the fans in your system and also to not catch on fire. A smart move, I think. You should also maybe try to take advantage of the space in the top shroud to stuff as many rogue cables in here as possible. This probably isn't the case for you if you want to run a full storage array, however, as there's only space for one 3.5-inch drive, and that's up here, and three 2.5-inch drives around back. Fractal's larger cases tend to offer a plethora of storage mounting options and probably would be a better fit for that kind of application. Now let's change gears into mini ITX land with the Torrent Nano. I really like that Fractal kept the same design language from what they know works with the bigger cases and just applied it here. We see the same open and angular front panel design, the same 180mm fan mounting at the front of the case, even though there is only room for one of them this time, the same top mounted PSU shroud, and the same seamless tempered tempered glass panels with toolless latching mechanism. The side panel detaches easily but firmly by tugging on the rear metal tab and clicks pretty satisfyingly back into place. We can start at the back this time to see that yes, of course things are squished a bit here, but you still get Velcro ties and proper routing channels for cables. Depth is actually significantly better than on the Compact, with about 23mm, which makes little sense given that the width of the case is exactly the same on both. But there is a motherboard bump out on the Nano that affords this extra room. With small builds, you're typically going to have fewer cables, and with the greater depth, I don't think cable management will be an issue in this case. One thing you don't get, however, is a fan hub, which is a bit of a disappointment, even though from looking at the two cases side by side, it does appear that there is room and mounting points for one. The SSD bracket back here can fit two 2.5-inch SSDs, and there's another up top in the PSU shroud if you need it. Size-wise, this is going to be on the big boy side of things in the ITX world at 374mm tall or 14.7 inches. But that does mean that it affords not only mini ITX but also mini DTX compatibility, stretching the bottom of the case out enough so that there are 3 expansion slots for chunky graphics cards. Those GPUs can be up to 335mm in length this time, meaning that the vast majority of hardware used in a small system will fit here with no issue. You can also put huge power supplies up top, up to 200mm if you remove the drive bracket, meaning that if for some reason you need 1200 watts in a build like this, you can even use the Dark Power Pro 12. Where you're going to have to make some compromises is in your cooling setup. As with any ITX case, don't expect to fit a 360mm radiator in here at all. If you want to put a 280mm AAO in, which is something that some other companies have made happen recently, you'll need to put it at the bottom, which, as we've discovered, isn't ideal from a noise and longevity standpoint of your pump. The front of the case can support either this single 180mm fan or a 240mm radiator. Given the width of this case and the fact that it can still fit monster air coolers, I think that might be the better way to go. Leave the front 180 fan in there and cool your CPU with a Dark Rock Pro 4 or the NHD 15. My test build in the Torrent Compact went about as I expected. I ran into really no issues with the build quality or performance, although I did have to alter my testing hardware to fit with the front fans installed as they come stock. Additionally, be aware that the top-mounted PSU shroud makes it such that the standard length PCIe cables will not reach if routed down and underneath the GPU and then out the bottom grommet. I had to route mine up and over, and this looks honestly pretty sloppy, so plan on investing in some cable extensions. I tested with a 12700K and an RX 6800, and temps were excellent, hovering around 65C for the CPU and 58C for the GPU under full load. I ran out of time, however, and didn't build in the Nano. Maybe we could do a dedicated build in it on the channel soon, so get subscribed for that. So what's the verdict here? Well, if your goal is airflow and build quality, Fractal has come up with 2 excellent and appropriate follow-ups in their Torrent line. Both the Compact and the Nano don't sacrifice either of these values in the name of size. However, there are a few compromises here, mainly due to fitment and cable management, especially on the Compact. Be prepared to exercise your best cable management skills and also plan accordingly when it comes to GPU clearance with your given CPU cooling solution. I think my recommendation here might be to go with a tower air cooler and to leave the front 180s in place on both cases. This gives you the most interior room and the best airflow front to back. $120 for the Nano seems like a really good price point, and the Compact can be had for $170 for the RGB version or $150 for the standard. I think $150 is the right number here, and I'd like to see the RGB Torrent Compact eventually slide down a bit in price, but either way, you're still getting a really solid enclosure with only minimal drawbacks. What do you guys think of the Torrent Compact and the Torrent Nano? Let me know down below in the comments. Also, don't forget to hit that like button and consider visiting the BPS Customs merch store at bpscustoms.com. As always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.